Take me back to Janky Town. I want to get back to Janky Town.
I mean, it's always really telling when someone creates a technology and then refuses to use it, right?
That's what I always said. That was my big line. It's like, why do all the tech entrepreneurs all have apocalypse bunkers?
I
know. Do they all just have too much money and they're bored, or is it like they actually
totally
feel like they're creating this doomsday machine and they want to, which apparently wouldn't work at all, but I've heard that those apocalypse bunkers wouldn't, it's basically just an expensive man cave.
Right. But I mean, it's interesting. I always find all of this stuff kind of like an interesting indictment of these classic arguments that we've had about capitalism and socialism, or worker uprising, right? We're more disenfranchised. There's more of us than ever before. The labor capital divide is as highest as it's ever been, and we have more tools to organize ourselves than ever before, and yet that proletariat uprising nowhere to be found.
Okay, let's unpack some of those because you are incredibly intelligent and incredibly concise, but sometimes that we have to unpack that.
Okay.
What was the first thing you said? Labor capital?
Yeah, so I guess, I haven't read Marx in a really long time, and not thoroughly, so once again, fact checkers should appear and fact check me. But the central thing, right, was that the worker class was always going to be bigger, right? And
the proletariat
and the capital class, the landowners and the barons and everyone was going to be hyper concentrated, and eventually the oppression would be so much that we'd all organize and uprise and overthrow the system, and that was how things were going to go, and the numbers were there. And I guess this is my own take on it, but the fault in the logic was he didn't kind of see that capitalism was going to commoditize labor. And so when labor became a commodity, so for example, with globalization, by the 80s, we had added 1 billion workers to the global economy, right? Because we globalized, and then all of a sudden, all these peasants from China were moving into city centers and becoming laborers in the factories. And in Russia came online, and all this, stuff happened. And what happened was the global price of labor dropped, because the supply of labor was so high all of a sudden, right? And that's because labor follows a commodity logic. It's it's a commodity anything else. We're people, but we're a commodity.
Well, I was gonna say, when they say soul-crushing job, you were literally being turned in from a person to a thing, right?
Exactly. And so instead of having more workers, instead of making workers more powerful, it made them less powerful by making them cheap.
Yep.
I guess would be my breakdown of that.
Yeah, and then so if you have no bargaining power because
right, and so our revolution, is further away, even though there's more of us.
So now does it get to the point where I think that's the next step, if you're being cynical, is basically just tricking people into thinking that they
have choice.
Yeah, right.
or agency in the situation.
Or should be, very grateful to make what they do make, or have the security they do have.
Absolutely. That's something that's very on steroids, I think, in American society compared to other societies, where it's if you don't have something, it's a personal failing, and if you do have it, it's as a result of your own virtue and hard work. And
boy, that's a tough one to crack too.
Yeah, it's very culturally ingrained, and it keeps us accepting things that are unacceptable, like student debt and
and it's just all
poverty.
It's all about bottom line, right? I mean, it's all about the margins and how can you increase productivity, how can you it's a weird thing, because in some ways efficiency is the most beautiful thing ever, right? Doing more with less is a really, and in some ways, in terms of our how we sort of power the earth with electricity and vehicles and all that, we need to become more efficient, right? It's good to do more with less. It's good to have well insulated houses. It's good to all these things help us have more of a bounty and keep our planet and all that. But when you take that to the extreme, or when you extrapolate that into, I guess, labor, you're always going to be trying to get the most you can out of and you're trying to pass that along to the customer. Like, nobody wants to have employees that are like bad employees, right? But at what point, you know, that's the tricky part about where if you're the business owner, it's like sort of very easy to always justify paying your people as little as you can afford to pay them, because you're like, well, I'm the business owner, I have more headaches, or I'm the one who's running the show, or it's never as easy as you think to be a business owner, like, which it's not, but like, it just becomes very, very difficult. And then when you extrapolate that onto like a huge company, it gets even harder for someone to like stay in touch with what a person that works for their company is like.